Welcome back. David Penn here. You're at the Professor Penn podcast. This is episode number 103, Strategy. That was a very quick, cold open. That was Governor Hochul of New York, the state of New York, attempting to attend the memorial service of an officer slain uh, in her state. And it was a private service, and the fellow officers rejected her and would not allow her to attend. That's really a big deal. That's quite symbolic of what's going on in our country. This is a governor of a state who, and I'm not inside her head, perhaps she really had a sincere desire to pay her respects. Perhaps she saw it as a political opportunity. We do not know. Perhaps it was both. But the people that were there at the service rejected her, which is pretty striking, actually. If you think about it, the governor of a state barred from entry to a memorial service of a slain state employee or city employee, that's a big deal. This is where we're at. This is reality. We got to deal with reality. We have to have strategies to deal with reality. I want to welcome you back. It's April 4th. We're happy to be here. We hope you're well. My thinking is developing because of this relationship that we have, this investment we're making together in building a community. For example, I talked on a recent podcast about we don't need 51% of the people. We need 300 Spartans here in Minnesota to get the job done. And then I went into my office and I got an email, and the title of the email was 300 Spartans. And a guy showed up. He's 27 years old. He's a young man. And he said, "How do I get involved in the movement?" And I'm so busy, I haven't been able to give him, the time and effort that he deserves. That's such a powerful statement he's making. And I've made an appointment to go out to breakfast with him and get to know him, because another thing about this movement, hey, we don't use people here, okay? Free People Radio, this movement is not about seeing people as instruments or inventory. We are trying to form real relationships that are based on enhancing human well-being and create a movement that is sincere in its core. It's not based on the illegitimacy of the twin pillars of the Democrat liberal order, which is the coercion of the U.S. military and its nuclear weapons and the coercion of materialism in the U.S. dollar. That's what our culture is standing on, and we've been talking about it, and I do want to review it a little bit because those are ideas that people really don't talk about. They say, "Oh, we're defending the post-World War II Democrat liberal order," as if it's the end of history. It's the best, the finest, the greatest. And all it is the next regime. I have a friend of mine, close friend, she's Chinese, and she talks about in China how these dynasties come up. And, some dynasties last 30 years and some dynasties last 500 years. And we've had you could call it a Washingtonian dynasty that was established in 1776. And here we are in 2024, and this dynasty is getting rather rickety. And when you see a governor who represents the dynasty being rejected by the people at a funeral, you see that there is a feeling amongst the people that the leadership is illegitimate. And when illegitimacy, and we're going to talk about that a lot today, that's a big part of our podcast, that is both sides are viewing the other as corrupt and illegitimate. So from the status quo, from the establishment, they're labeling the nationalist movement as maggots and the leader of that movement as a racist and a fascist. Okay, that's great. That's their program. And here we have a governor that can't even get into a funeral to pay her respects because she's viewed as illegitimate. And what they're really saying is that your policies, Governor Hochul, contributed to the death of this American citizen who lived a life of service. Uh, One could say this is coming apart at the seams. I'm going to say that the system is working, and it's far more robust than what either side wants to give it credit for. Both sides are saying that this election is the last election. If Donald Trump gets elected, there's never going to be another election. He's never leaving office. And then on the right, or on the nationalist movement, they're saying if Biden is elected, we're never going to have another election. So everybody is making this the end all to be all. And that's hyperbole, right? We have a constitution. We have a an institutional base called rule of law that undergirds the whole project here. But that in and of itself, and we're going to talk about that tonight, that in and of itself bears close scrutiny, very close scrutiny. And we're going to start wading into that. And that, just like we went into this last podcast and I started talking about the $550 billion a year spent on military and veteran salaries, putting some 2 million people on the payroll of the status quo and expecting a lot of blowback from that, which interestingly, I didn't get any. Maybe it is because I have so much respect and almost reverence for the training and for the experience of people that give themselves over to the martial way. Maybe people cut me some slack. Maybe that came through. I was telling Tanner, who's in producing for me today, I almost took that episode down 1 hour before it went up because I think that's such a controversial subject to start talking about the millions of military members, many of whom are firmly committed to the post-World War II Democrat liberal order and the American imperialist empire that strides across the entire world. I think I looked up today and I can't remember the exact number, but I think U.S. military is stationed in, if memory serves correct, and you can go find this on Wikipedia, in 178 countries. U.S. military members are stationed in 178 countries, or some really ridiculous number like this, which means our country has no border. We're everywhere. Is it any surprise that we don't have a border when we have no borders? By choice, by free will. We, the people, have chosen an organization of political economy where we have no borders. And then we sit here and we look at the southern border and we say, it's Joe Biden's fault that there's no border there. Well, that's a little bit self-serving. We're blaming Joe Biden for a policy, which is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, which both conservatives and liberals in a uniparty have fully supported and fully funded since 1946. We're blaming borderlessness on one person and one administration? No, I can't do that. I can't do that. Now, we could identify one administration that would reestablish a border, but you can't reestablish that border without looking at the borderlessness of our country generally. These two issues are related. And this is, perhaps I had some people give me feedback that this was kind of a new concept. Yeah, maybe. And it's a rather esoteric concept or a philosophical concept, but it's actually a very real concept. Come on. If I don't have any borders, I don't have any borders. What are we blaming Biden for? We have to reestablish our spiritual borders for how are we going to fix this? Okay, so here's the meat. The action item is to reestablish borders. American citizens must reestablish their spiritual borders. We're going to keep talking about this. I had a communication, and this is really a strange thing, and I'm going to share this. I do a lot of posting, in social media. Very few people respond to me because if you're following me, and please go to X and please follow Professor Penn because we're trying to form a community there. And very few people argue with me there because they read my posts and they go, I don't really want any of that. Just don't want it. Okay, cool. But I had a response and it shone through like a shining star. And then here's what I think to myself. This is a scam. This is the security state messing with me. But then I can feel a special person communicating with me. And the message was, and I thought it was a woman, but it could have been a man, because of course I can't see them. Talk about spiritual borders. And that's why we have this community to communicate with each other, to build a set of ideas that we can then take into political action through strategy, which is tonight's uh, main theme. Well, one of the main parts of the strategy is we have to rebalance our country and reintroduce a spiritual dimension, not just in isolated enclaves of people. And I say all the time, we're going to pray. The prayer for the people that are watching, that are coming, that don't believe in God. If you don't have spiritual borders, there's no way you can find God unless God intervenes into your life like a miracle. And why I say that is that would be me. So it does happen. But to find the spiritual world, you must make the choice to have some spiritual borders. Uh, but to pray, as we're about to pray, one could remove all of the references to a creator and just look at the thankfulness. And just in being thankful, we would transform our well being. Thankfulness is an antidote to arrogance, and arrogance underlies the condition of humanity, which is diseased. Humanity is diseased by arrogance, by the aggrandizement of our own intellect and our own instrumentality. We think a little bit too highly of ourselves. But when we're thankful, even if it's not towards a creator, we're just in a place of thankfulness, of gratefulness. It has a biophysiological effect on our bodies that it's very good for us physically, mentally, spiritually. So let's try it together. If you don't believe in God, just be into the thankful part of it. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your only Son to die on the cross that I might be saved. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. And I believe that I've received health for all my flesh. For those of us that are struggling with physical infirmity, I believe that I've received health for all my flesh. Now, in reference to the previous podcast, of course, I'm going to fall behind here because it's a long intro tonight. And I'll try to wrap up on time, but if we go over, hey, c'est la vie. You can always turn off and come back. But I'm very happy to see so many people tuning into the live chat and so many new people coming to the podcast. And the podcast is growing. And the Hebrews thing, Royce and I go up Friday night. That would be on April 5th at 9 p.m. Central Time. We're getting a couple 100,000 views on these Hebrew podcasts. So Free People is growing. And we really appreciate putting together this community, being in this role. It's just a role. If I could do something else, I'd do it. I just want to tell the people that are coming in, I'm not into this, okay? I'm doing this because I'm called to do it. It's not, um, it's only consensual because I'm called to do it. I don't have any particular desire to sit here on a podcast, and I'm not into politics by nature because the people suck, number one. And number two, I have so many things I like to do that have nothing to do with politics and podcasting and the movement. But I have to give those things up right now because this is a very special time in American history. We're coming up on the News That Matters, and you're going to see why I'm so intense about this. But in reference to this last week, we were on X talking about the people that are in the administrative state or are attorneys or doctors or people that really are educated in our elite institutions, the professors, the people in government that really understand what's going on. Like our 2 million veterans and active duty military that actually are in the military and see with their own eyes what's going on. They know what's going on. They see it for themselves. They're not seeing it on a podcast. They go in the warehouse and all the shells are missing. Where did they go? I mean, there are people in the military that actually see the inventory going out the back door, just like in the movie Goodfellas. Exact same thing. So, one of the participants in the social media shared with me a prayer for the healing of those people. And it was a beautiful prayer. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I have a insight into how prayer works, which it's about Thanksgiving. So I tried to rework the prayer. It's not really mine. It was an idea. It was a prayer for the people who are involved in the activities of our country that see things that they could bring forward that would help us see the truth. And if we seek the truth, we'll be set free. And so I want to read this. We may come back to it, but it's really for the people that can help us find the truth. And if you're watching and there's information that you can bring forward, this prayer is for you. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark and granting humankind the power to choose. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring sight to the blind and feelings to the victims. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. Thank you for granting the people an awakening. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for removing the cloak of darkness for those with eyes to see. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for the healing from curses and spells and rituals that ensnare me. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for offering mankind salvation and to choose spiritual borders instead of the addiction to sin. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for all who speak out against evil, walking by faith and not by sight, so that the truth will set us free. News that matters. News that matters. Well, the news that matters. This is why Professor Penn is Professor Penn. As we sit here on April 4th, the escalation that's going on in the world, which is not really being reported in the mainstream news, and which is not really on X or any of the social media channels to speak of, it's almost as if nobody cares, which really pisses me off because I have 5 children. I'm sitting here with Tanner. He's got how old's your daughter? 4.5 years old. For the children, the people my age that don't care, boy, you suck. Because as I said on a previous podcast, and I said it on Hebrews, you'll see it Friday night if you'll watch, when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963, the entire country was glued to the television because they knew their ass was on the line. Now, our ass is on the line today But everybody's going about their business as if we're large and in charge. And I'm going to tell you right now, we are not large and in charge. This is rapidly getting out of control. And then we're going to find out really what's going on, what the real situation is. And my entire life, the foreign policy of the United States and the domestic policy of the United States was a bastion against ever finding out who was the baddest, right? That was the point of the whole deterrent policy. We were going to deter others from challenging our military might. And suddenly, with U.S. military in 178 countries, that's not working. And the reason why I think it's not working is when you have an illegitimate imperialist project fenced as the post-World War II Democrat order, liberal order, when you fence that as the true and the good, but in reality, it's just colonialism 2.0. People, when you extract enough wealth out of them and manipulate them long enough, they really don't give a shit anymore. They're willing to die to throw off the yoke of imperialism. And of course, we don't recognize that here because, hey, we're sitting on Sunday and we're watching the football game and the Jets fly over and our self-image is tied up in the American empire. We don't recognize the effect of this empire throughout the world on other people, nor do we care. We don't care. So guess how we end up caring? You put your hand on a stove, right? Your hand gets burnt. That's when you care. You realize, ooh, that hurt. And we haven't had a real hurt in this country since 1861, okay? Yeah, 600,000 people died in World War II. Bad deal. Vietnam, 100,000 people died. 100,000 people died in a population of 200 million at the time. Okay, everybody knew somebody who died, a cousin, a friend of a friend, but it wasn't your brother, and it certainly, was not so pervasive that people said, hey, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? So since I saw you last, the Israelis, as our Palestinian people like to call the Israelis, bombed the Iranian consulate building in Damascus, which was right adjacent to the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, and killed the leadership of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that was domiciled in that building, killed 8 really senior Iranian officials. And when you attack a consulate or an embassy, that is actually considered to be the territory of the country whose flag flies over that building. So the Israelis bombed Iran. That's international law. I'm not making it up, okay? It's a big deal when you start bombing embassies, because embassies are safe spaces, like churches. I had a thing, you run into the church, we don't kill people in churches. Okay, sure. We don't kill people in embassies. Okay, sure. Actually, they're in there, those senior military operatives, to plan operations against Israeli and American assets in the region. And the Israelis said, the church and the embassy, screw it, we're going to kill these people. And they killed them. Well, this has triggered a massive escalation of tensions in the Middle East. This whole thing has been a proxy war between the Iranians and the Israelis. Well, the proxy war is over now. As we sit here right now, Tel Aviv is being evacuated. The Iranians have sworn to take revenge, to retaliate against Israel directly for this attack. And unless there's some kind of miraculous intervention before I see you next week, the Iranians will have launched strikes on Israel from within Iran. And then what we have is a direct conflict between Israel and Iran. Okay. Where do you think that's heading? I'm pausing because some of you have some eschatology. Some of you have some training in eschatology. Some of you have some notions of what this means, what it could mean. I'm just looking at you. Because go look at the news, turn on CBS or ABC and NBC, and ask yourself, are they running 24-hour coverage of the coming direct conflict between two nuclear armed powers in the Middle East sworn to destroy each other? Oh, no, Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. We're about to find out, aren't we? We're about to find out. It's terrifying. So that's where we're at today. That's the news that matters. And that's why, I am doing this to get the word out, because the media does not want us to know how dire these situations are. And I don't think the Israelis can be restrained by the Biden administration. I really don't think they can. I was watching on Morning Joe driving into the studio this morning. They were talking about this thing, and the Israeli that they had on Morning Joe was making a very intellectually informed case about why they have to destroy Hamas and why Israel is so careful not to kill civilians, and they don't want to kill civilians. This whole thing is at that level, a propaganda war. Once the Iranians attack Israel, there isn't going to be any propaganda anymore. There's going to be a winner and a loser. I mean, and now maybe things will go up incrementally. Maybe they'll go slowly. Maybe they'll stop. I don't want to be a fortune teller. But the possibility exists that a general war is going to break out in the Middle East. I mean, a real big war. And the Iraqi affiliates of the Iranians have already launched airstrikes, drone strikes, and missile strikes in Israel proper. So this is escalating. And you see me not saying a lot because I don't want to fortune tell. I have no idea what's going to happen, and neither does anybody else. It's not in anybody's hands but the Iranians and the Israelis. And you can go online right now on YouTube and watch Israeli citizens in cars evacuating Tel Aviv. They're getting out of the city. They are afraid that the attack incoming from Iran will be so powerful that it's not safe to live in Tel Aviv, the major city of Israel. Big deal. Okay, that's that one. Now, in the meantime, the United States and Japan, since I saw you last, have announced the most significant change to their military alliance since the 1960s. After World War II, Japan, because you see, put your hand on that stove, right? Oop, that hurt. Japan said, we're going to swear off Bushido and our thousands of years of tradition of being a military-orientated martial culture, and we're going to go pacifist. There's something about 2 nuclear bombs turned them away from militarism. And so that was 45. Now it's 2024, so it's, 45. That's 50. That's 55, 75. Took them almost 80 years to say, back into the war business we're going. Because the United States has convinced, and the Japanese are convinced, that they have to rearm and reformat Japan's culture to what? Confront China. So the U.S. is bolstering its forces in the region to prepare for a future war with China. According to the Financial Times, which is a very leftist paper, the U.S. and Japan will unveil a plan to restructure the U.S. military command in Japan to strengthen operational planning and exercises between the two nations. The Japanese have increased their military budget by some 56%, and they are acquiring lots of U.S. military hardware, giving them the power to launch missiles that will strike into the heartland of China. If you're Chinese and you look at this, it doesn't seem very friendly. And I have to tell you, having been in China many times, the Chinese hate the Japanese. Hate them. Hate them. Now, this free trade idea, there's a lot of Japanese assets in China. Japanese put their corporate power, their workshops in China to exploit and to take advantage of low-cost Chinese labor. There's a lot of Japanese-owned manufacturing in China. Great. It didn't work. These countries hate each other, and they've been at war off and on for centuries. Centuries of violence between the Japanese and Chinese. And, there's 53,000 U.S. troops stationed in Japan. It's the largest garrison of U.S. troops anywhere in the world. So, hey, there's another one for another flashpoint. Another flashpoint. Beijing also actually just criticized the United States very heavily because, we got Japan on one side of China. On the other side is India, which, the Indians have always tried to be a non-aligned nation. But under pressure, they're somewhat aligning now with the United States when it suits their purposes against the Chinese. And the Indians and the Chinese don't get along. They've been having conflict for a very, very long time. And there's a little gift left over again from the British. There's a province of India, Arunachal Pradesh, which is a part of India separated from India. It's not in India. It's not connected to India. It's separated by Bangladesh. It's over on the other side of Bangladesh. It's Indian territory. Interestingly, it's also claimed by the Chinese as their territory. And from time to time, the Indians and Chinese fight over this area. The last time, not very long ago, you want to talk about hatred? They put their guns down and they fought with baseball bats wrapped in barbed wire. 20 Indian soldiers died, 4 Chinese soldiers died. I want you to think about this kind of hatred, okay? We're not going to shoot each other. That's way too kind. We're going to beat each other to death with baseball bats wrapped in barbed wire. Isn't that special? That's cultural hatred right there. And the United States came into this dispute and said, hey, we're with India on this deal. So, of course, the Chinese hit back for the U.S. siding with India. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said, quote, China strongly deplores and firmly opposes this. The China-India boundary question is a matter between the two countries and has nothing to do with the U.S. side. And that's their opinion. And guess what? A little gift to us left by the British. This whole thing was set up by the British. It's called the McMahon Line, a boundary agreed upon between the British and Tibet in 1914 without any input from China at all. So here's the Chinese and Indian border, and China had nothing to do with it. Thank you, Great Britain, for all the little messes you've left us. Thank you, Western powers, for all these little potential flashpoints, as I said in the last podcast, almost as if they were setting up conflicts for decades down the road to make sure that wars would continue, like Kaliningrad. There's a great one. Isn't that great? Special? A part of Russia that's not connected to Russia. These little, shall we call them potholes, are all over the world, creating conflict. And, hey, post-World War II Democrat liberal order is turning out not to be the answer. So now we've got lots of competition and people want their back. You might want to blank that one off, right? In the meantime, just to round this out, the Philippines. Oh, hey, the Philippines. Where's that? Close to China, very close to Taiwan. The Philippines, the president there, Fernando Marcos Jr., this is the second Marcos that's been president. You can check out if you want to go back and look at history. We could do a whole podcast on Ferdinand Marcos and his wife. She was famous for having thousands of very expensive designer shoes. They robbed the country. Somehow his son ended up back as the president. The dad went down in disgrace. The son's back in charge. This requires a little bit of research, doesn't it? He vowed a response to China's actions in the South China Sea as tensions in the disputed waters continued to grow. In a statement on X, please join X, Marcos said that he has been meeting with members of the country's national security and defense leadership to craft a plan to protect and secure sovereignty, sovereign rights, and the jurisdiction while ensuring peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Marcos continued, over the succeeding weeks, there shall be implemented by the relevant national government agencies and instrumentalities a response and countermeasures that is proportionate, deliberate, and reasonable in the face of the open, unabating, illegal, coercive, aggressive, and dangerous attacks by agents of the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese Maritime Militia. There's another little flashpoint for you. This is why we're doing the podcast. Anybody know that there's a border conflict, a sea conflict between Philippines and China? Hey, look at the history of the United States and the Philippines. Does anybody know what the relationship was between the United States and the Philippines? Please go look it up. I think I'm going to have to put that in the next podcast because the United States and the Philippines have a long and tortured relationship. And then the economy. We can't leave this week without just a short trip into the economy. Because I'm reading on X all the time, all these Democrat shills, and I call them shills because, when you're selling air, you're shilling. And they're saying, oh, inflation's down, inflation's down. No, inflation is not down, okay? Inflation is exploding, and I know that because I go to the grocery store. How many of you in the audience do your own shopping? Someone's shopping for you, you might not recognize how wacko this is. So, what the Biden administration is doing is, and here we go. We got 10% of the people on the left that are highly involved, highly engaged, and relatively well informed. We got 10% of the people on the right that are highly engaged, highly informed. We got these two groups, right? They're the spin masters. Then we got everybody in the middle. They're just going to work trying to live their lives, right? And they're going, whoa, this is crazy. Well, what those people, and really the whole electorate, responds to is when you can't afford food, you get pissed. You go, hey, these guys, I like them, but they're breaking me. Let me give these other folks a try. It doesn't really get deep at that point when you can't afford groceries. And we're clearly in a period of very high inflation. The government statistics are lies. There's an old saying, right? There's lies, there's damn lies in statistics. They start out and they say, well, we want inflation to be around 2%. And then they make up the mathematical equations to generate the answer they're looking for. Hey, you have to be stupid to believe that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you're on the left and you're believing this. Just go to the grocery store. Just look at the things they can't hide. Like purchasing power of the United States dollar has declined 25% since Biden took office. 25%? Let's say you had $1,000 when Biden was sworn into the presidency. It's now $750. Great. Doesn't that feel great? That's called your net worth is shrinking. And if you own a business like me, they're putting you out of business. 8% interest rate to borrow money from a bank, nobody can make money. When nobody can make money, there's no money to tax. When there's no money to tax, guess what you do? You have to borrow more money. And our government is borrowing 1 trillion US dollars every 100 days. That means the money supply is continuing to expand without productivity, without creativity, without any profit. It's just paper. And as that paper continues to expand, inflation continues to go up. So they cannot lie to me. I'm in the supply chain. I know what's going on. We could do a whole podcast just on the economics of inflation. Hey, I've already got the subject for next week. Remind me, the Philippines and inflation. Those are good subjects for next week because these are things that Professor Penn knows about. And what they're dependent on is you don't know shit from Shinola. And that's why we love this audience, because this audience is engaged in we're studying together the facts. We're looking for the truth. We're truth-seeking media because we know the truth will set us free. And I've said this. When I was younger, I thought, oh, the truth will set me free. I'll be in heaven. No, that's not what's going to happen. The truth is just going to set us free from the matrix of lies within which we are trapped. And then we're going to look out, just like in that movie in The Matrix, we're going to look out, we're going to go, whoa, this is hell. What are we going to do next? We can't even get into fixing the problem until we understand what the problem is. My grandfather said, you can't fix a problem till you understand it. That's called the truth will set us free. Okay, on to the Ukraine, where there's going to be a funding very shortly for the continuation of this war. Okay, Speaker Mike Johnson's getting ready to fold. That'll be the end of Speaker Mike Johnson, most likely, but we don't know. That's also fortune telling. I'm going to play a relatively long piece. This is important. This is a piece that is an interview with a congressperson, Representative James Patrick McGovern, born in 1959. He's been a member of the United States House of Representatives since 1997. Now, I want to play this for two reasons. One, it says a lot. And number two, some of these people are very smart. This guy is sharp. And we need to know how sharp some of these people in the Unity Party are. These people are not dummies. They know exactly what they're doing. Tanner, I'm going to ask you to stop this a couple times, so be on the ready. Let's go through this together.
And joining me now is a lawmaker driving that effort, Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern. Congressman, thank you for being here. We're obviously talking about a discharge petition, which probably makes a lot of people's eyes water when we talk about congressional procedures. But just a simple explanation of it, if you get enough signatures to the floor, you can force any bill to get voted on. At this point, you have 191 signatures, but you need to get to 218. What's the prospect of that happening when you return from recess?
Well, I think it all depends on whether Speaker Johnson announces that he will schedule a vote on Ukraine. I mean, that is the issue. It is Ukraine. And we know that Ukraine will be out of ammunition, out of military equipment at the end of April.
Can you stop it, please? It's April 4th. They don't come back into session until April 9th. If they vote on this and they allocate resources to support the Ukraine, how are they going to get the military hardware to the Ukraine in time to stop the Russians, like in 2 weeks? What kind of scam are they running here? Please continue.
Trying to get the speaker to commit to scheduling a vote so we can help aid Ukraine in its fight against Vladimir Putin. Up to this point, we've gotten maybe some signals that he might, but then it appears he's not. So we don't know what's happening. But this is about putting pressure on the speaker to do what he should do. He ought to schedule a vote up or down on Ukraine. Let us have that debate. Let everybody be able to cast a vote. If you're for helping Ukraine against Putin, then you can vote yes. If you're not, you can. If you're on the side of Putin, you can vote no. But it is
stop. Okay, here. This is a very critical part of this piece. This guy's very smart. If you're for, schedule the vote. If you're for helping the Ukraine, you vote yes. And then he censored himself because he's tricky. If you're against, no, not if you're against it. No, if you're for Putin, you can vote no. Now, this is the scam. I am not for Putin. I am not for the Russians. I'm not for war. I'm anti-war. I'm anti-American imperialism. I'm anti an American economy that rests on the military-industrial complex. Now, this guy is saying, if you're anti-war, if you're anti the U.S. military-industrial complex in its voracious appetite for the American taxpayers' money, you're for Putin. That's not true. That's propaganda. Please continue.
Important that we have this vote.
Well, based on my reporting, it seems pretty unlikely that he just puts that bill on the floor without any changes to it. So that means your discharge petition, if you want that piece of legislation to pass, is perhaps the best way to get it there. But at this point of your 191, you only have one Republican signature, and that's outgoing Congressman Ken Buck. So that gets you back down to 190. Talk to me a little bit about the outreach that you've made to your colleagues across the aisle. Who are you talking to? Are you getting any kind of sense that there may be Republicans that are willing to join you in this effort?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of Republicans I've talked to that believe we should help Ukraine out. And the question is whether or not they have the courage to be able to sign a discharge petition to basically force the speaker's hand.
Stop,
and I think
please.
The pressure.
Stop, please. What he's about to say is that the people against this funding are the minority of the Republican caucus, and they are. But the American people are against this funding. And what he's going to draw out here is that in the caucus of the Congress, there's broad bipartisan support for the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, for the coercion of the U.S. military, and for the coercion of U.S. Economic power throughout the world. That's what these people all agree about, and that this is this small group of people that are American nationalists that he's going to name MAGA. I like American nationalists, and that they are obstructionists, and that there needs to be a vote. What this is politics. And he's saying, do these Republicans have the spine to sign a discharge petition or to vote for this funding? And the fact of the matter is, many of them, if they do so, are going to get voted out in the next election cycle, because we at Free People, We are part of a movement. We are in a people's movement in America. You and I, we're a people's movement. We don't want to fund war. It's not who we are. Don't want to do it. It's a scam. It's a racket. We know it's a racket. And let him continue and tell us how it's a racket, please.
And that will be increased when we come back. We don't come back until April 9th. Again, we're told that, that Ukraine is out of equipment by the end of April. So, I mean, there's not a lot of time here. So I think the pressure on those Republicans who say they want to stand up to Putin will be even greater. And maybe the speaker will do the right thing. Maybe he will schedule a vote. But if he doesn't, this is kind of the only option we have available to us. And even this option,
Can you stop it, please?
There are.
He's saying the speaker will do the right thing. That's in his opinion. And if I was in his role, or if I ever get a chance to do that, because maybe I will, I wouldn't say do the right. I would say, in my opinion, the right thing to do is I wouldn't represent that I'm correct, because there's many street corners. And in a functioning republic, a democratic republic, we listen to each other and we are careful to craft policy based on the totality of people's views. We don't know what right and wrong is necessarily. We're struggling. It's the search for truth. Please continue.
There are ways the speaker could try to derail it. Mm-hmm. So, again, I don't know what's so controversial about scheduling the vote. You let people vote up or down, and I believe the House would overwhelmingly pass a package to aid Ukraine.
So I'll tell you what's so controversial about it, Congressman.
Yes, that's true. The House will vote overwhelmingly. Very likely this aid package will pass, and the military-industrial complex will get its money. The point here is that there is a growing number of elected representatives that are opposed to this. And that group keeps losing. Doesn't matter, because every time we lose, this is going to be about strategy. Tonight's about strategy. Every time we lose, we gain power. We must be willing to lose. Please continue.
Which is kind of the big elephant in the room, and that is that there's a group of conservative House Republicans who never want to see this measure voted on, probably because you're right that it'll pass, and that could lead to a motion to vacate for the Speaker of the House. That's probably the biggest reason that he's not moving ahead with it. So to that end, if he's willing to put that Senate bill on the floor with no changes, would you be willing to protect him in the event that a motion to vacate were brought up and you were forced to vote on it?
Well, that's something we ought to talk about. The speaker ought to talk to Hakeem Jeffries and have that conversation. And again, I think it's clear that he's not going to bring the Senate bill up.
So in other words, Speaker Johnson, to keep his role as the speaker, is being told he must bend his knee to the Democrat leadership, Hakeem Jeffries, and cut a deal to maintain and keep his power. That would mean he doesn't have any power. Please continue.
He's already said that he wants to make some changes. So, let's see what the changes he wants to make are. And, if it's something the administration can live with, then, if that's the case, we ought to bring that up. And if he doesn't want to bring it up, we can bring it up under a discharge petition. So there ought to be a vote. This issue is important enough where the entire House ought to be able to have a chance to say yes or no. And they need to, and basically they need to break with the MAGA wing of their party. I mean, this is ridiculous. It is a minority of the Republican conference that is causing all this trouble. The Speaker of the House has to have the spine to stand up to the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world and do what's right for the country and for the world. This is embarrassing, quite frankly.
Stop, please.
So tell me.
So this man's going to tell me what's right for the country and what's right for the world, because the Uni Party controls the Congress. There's a handful of people that are fighting for the American citizen well-being and for an economy that is not based on war. And he's telling us, hey, you know what? These people, they're the problem. They're not a problem. It's politics. Our entire political system is set up to protect the rights of minorities, minority opinions. And here's Speaker Johnson. Boy, is he caught between a rock and a hard place. If he brings this up for a vote, there's going to be a motion to vacate. If he doesn't bring it up for a vote, there's going to be a discharge petition. This man is stuck in the middle. Reminds me of a song, but we'll leave that for an upcoming podcast. Stuck in the middle with you. He's stuck. And what's going to end up happening here, of course, most likely is they're going to fund this war. Please continue.
What you'd be open to when it comes to changes to this bill. He's floated the idea of potentially loaning the money to Ukraine in a very kind of soft way, even perhaps giving them the opportunity to default on it. Would that be enough if it was separated from Israel funding? Or what if it was tied to some sort of border security measure? What, if any of those things, are you open to?
Well, first of all, we're going to have to see what it is that he's proposing. We have to look at and actually read the bill. But look, I'm going to rely on the administration to tell me whether or not whatever they're proposing on Ukraine means that Ukraine will get the money, whether this is workable. If it is, then I think they would be open to it. But either way, he has to schedule something. We have to put something on the floor. We're running out of time. And the longer he waits, quite frankly, the harder it is going to be for him. Look, I understand the speaker's anxiety. I mean, he comes to work every day wondering whether it's going to be his last day as speaker. But Democrats, we've bailed him out on appropriation bills. We're happy to work with him if he's going to do the right thing. And the right thing here is to bring a bill on Ukraine.
Stop.
We need to help Ukraine.
That's good enough. The Democrats are going to own this guy. Okay, that's what he's either going to resign, lose his speakership, or the Democrats are going to own him. And the guy, look how smart this guy is. I mean, I don't like him, but man, I respect him. This guy's been around a long time. But let me just comment on one thing that strikes me. This guy was, this is Massachusetts. While in college, he worked as a congressional intern to then Senator George McGovern, who was a two-time presidential candidate, and for whom he campaigned for. This guy, this war hawk trying to fund this war, got his start in politics working for the most anti-war senator, the most anti-war, anti-Vietnam War guy. Him and Eugene McCarthy, these were the twin towers of, we don't want to have an American empire. So somehow between the early 80s and today, this guy turned into a proponent of war. I don't get it. I was there. We're the same age. Went through the same experiences. I remember, how many here remember Senator George McGovern? Who remembers him? Who remembers his presidential campaigns? Who remembers Senator Eugene McCarthy? Who remembers these people? Because they've been plowed under. They were losers. But what they were interested in was peace. I remember this just popped into my mind out of nowhere. My mother had this beautiful painting. It was a big painting that she put up in our house of a peace sign, beautifully painted, and it said McCarthy 68. And then McGovern picked up the mantle of McCarthy and ran and was destroyed politically because this uni-party and this self-image we have as Americans of being the baddest bleeps in the world, we all get in on that. So whatever we do, if we're impotent or divorced or our businesses fail or we've never been in a fight, hey, we're Americans. Great, isn't it, how things work? Okay, let's talk about strategy. I love this piece. This is the famous martial artist Bruce Lee in one of his great movies talking about strategy. Could you please play this, Tanner?
What is the highest technique you hope to achieve?
To have no technique.
Very good. What are your thoughts when facing an opponent?
There is no opponent.
And why is that?
Because the word I does not exist.
So, continue.
A good fight should be like a small play, but played seriously. A good martial artist does not become tense, but ready. Not thinking, yet not dreaming. Ready for whatever may come. When the opponent expands, I contract. When it contracts, I expand. And when there is an opportunity, I do not hit. It hits all by itself.
You know, can you play it one more time just because it's so profound? I want everybody to get another shot at it.
What is the highest technique you hope to achieve?
To have no technique.
Very good. What are your thoughts when facing an opponent?
There is no opponent.
And why is that?
Because the word I does not exist.
So, continue.
A good fight should be like a small play, but played seriously. A good martial artist does not become tense, but ready. Not thinking, yet not dreaming. Ready for whatever may come. When the opponent expands, I contract. When it contracts, I expand. And when there is an opportunity, I do not hit. It hits all by itself.
Well, Bruce Lee. 1,000 years from now, Bruce Lee is going to be known if there's humanity, and it's because of that. That is the essence of spiritual borders. To be in the martial way is to choose the martial way. This is so profound philosophically that it challenges the human mind to get a grip on what Bruce Lee is saying in that. You know, when he says there's no opponent, he's saying we're all American citizens. When he says there's no I, he's saying it's not about me. I'm not in my ego trying to aggrandize myself. I have chosen spiritual borders. Therefore, I'm aligned with the spiritual world. That when the opportunity of a fight presents itself, when the opponent expands, I contract. This is an energy idea. You have to know when to advance and when to retreat. And when the opportunity comes, you're not in it yourself. It hits all by itself. And I don't mean my fist. I mean the ideas that we deliver as this community, as the nationalist community. If we have spiritual borders in this strategy that we are implementing to restore our sense of American community, if we have those spiritual borders, if we take the responsibility, each one of us, of choosing spiritual borders, it's going to happen, and we don't have to do anything but let it happen through us. Get out of the way. Let our opponents be caught up in their ego. Let our opponents demonize us, or as Christ said, turn the other cheek. It's all about our internal spiritual borders as individual American citizens. That's how this is going to be turned. When each one of us decides, one by one, that the spiritual borders that the left have removed, because anything goes, right? Why did they do that? Because they broke our connection to the spiritual world. They want to govern us instead of us being self-governing. It's just that simple. So people go, well, what's the strategy? How are we going to how are we going to get the money? We need $400 billion to win. We need this, we need that, we need people. No, we need each American citizen to choose to discover and then reinforce their spiritual borders and then spread that one to another. And when we do that, guess what's going to happen? It's going to happen without us grunting. We don't have to fight. It's going to happen all by itself. Now, let me show you how it's happening. Here's another long one. And people are going to say, well, you're exploiting this, Professor Penn. Yes, I am. because when the opponent contracts, I expand. The Democrat is going to eat themselves because we have now spent generation after generation teaching our young people about colonialism, the evils of colonialism, the evils of white settler colonialism, and now we have this drama going on in the Middle East. And it doesn't matter what the facts of the case are. We've got a lot of propagandized people that believe that Israel is a white settler colonialist enterprise. And look at what's happening. Please play number 3.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Pro-Palestine protesters disrupted the largest one-night fundraiser in presidential campaign history here in New York yesterday. The star-studded event at Radio City Music Hall in Manhattan featured President Biden alongside former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, raised a record $25 million for Biden's re-election campaign. More than 5,000 people paid to attend, with tickets costing up to $500,000 each. For $100,000, guests could get a picture with the 3 U.S. presidents taken by the renowned photographer Annie Leibovitz. Celebrities in attendance included Queen Latifah, Mindy Kaling, and Lizzo. The main event was an onstage conversation with the 3 U.S. presidents moderated by late-night talk show host Stephen Colbert. But just 10 minutes into their conversation, Biden was talking. Protesters began disrupting the event, calling on the president to stop arming Israel and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza.
We had no president on January the 6th. There was an insurrection.
Shame on you, Joe Biden! Shame on you! Shame on you! You are genocide in Palestine, and no amount of full concern that you do will change the billions that you are doing! Out the door. There's blood on your hands! One right here. Blood on your hands!
Permanent victory in Palestine. But I do believe
For people watching at home, excuse me, Mr. President. For people who are watching at home on the feed, you may not be able to hear that there's some protesters here who, hold on a second here.
You talk about the innocent death of Palestinians. How dare you talk about the innocent death of Palestinians? Palestinians are dying right now because of your actions. Palestinians are dying right now because of your actions. Because of what you're doing. Because of the things that you're doing. Blood is on your hands.
Shame. Stop brutalizing him. Stop brutalizing him.
The protesters were all physically escorted outside. The event disruption was organized by a coalition including Adla Justice Project, Palestinian Youth Movement, and Jewish Voice for Peace, and the Sunrise Movement. Meanwhile, outside the event, thousands took to the streets to protest President Biden's support for Israel's assault on Gaza. Protesters gathered at Bryant Park and marched up to Radio City Music Hall. Democracy Now! Was there and spoke to some of the protesters about why they were there.
Currently, we are working on the Leave It Blank New York campaign for the upcoming primary happening April 2nd on Tuesday. We are asking people to leave it blank because there is no uncommitted option in New York City. So we rather tell them to scan their ballot as is, and that will then count as uncommitted to show Genocide Joe that we are not going to stand while we watch our brothers and sisters being genocided.
My name is Jenna. I am a first-generation American Palestinian, and we have had enough. My family's voted Democrat for as long as we've lived in the U.S. It's heartbreaking. We feel guilty, and we feel awful. I feel like I voted for my own people's genocide. And I'm done letting Democrats get away with it just because we're scared of the alternative.
My name is Karina Garcia. I'm running for Vice President of the United States with my comrade Claudia de la Cruz, and we're running with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And we're here today as we've been through all of these protests for Palestine because we understand that our government is orchestrating this genocide, that without their support, without their financing, Israel could not be doing what they're doing to the Palestinian people. And it's important for us to come together and not allow these war criminals like Biden or Clinton or Obama to just use these moments to be in New York City to raise money. The people are waking up and they're seeing that the Democratic Party is where hope goes to die. And that the people have to build a new government for the working class, for the people of this country, that we cannot allow them to drag us into the 1800s, drag us into a nuclear war.
You know, the fact that we had access to watching a genocide in real time, and we were able to see for ourselves that these people are liars, that everything that they have told us about Palestine and about the Middle East has been a lie, means that we are able to make, and also we're able to make the connections. Young people are able to make the connections between what's happening in Palestine, what's happening to migrants in the U.S., what's happening to queer and trans people in the U.S., and we are saying free Palestine, people over profit, and an end to U.S. imperialism everywhere.
Anybody who sees this, no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, you have to take part in this. You cannot be silent. Everyone must become involved. There are lives being lost. There are pregnant women being run over by tanks. This is abominable. We cannot learn about the Holocaust and watch movies about the Holocaust and then say, oh, well, you know, I would have done something then. You have to do it now. It's like Aaron Bushnell said, what would you be doing during those times? You're doing it now. So if you don't like what you're doing, if it's not enough, change it.
Voices from outside Radio City Music Hall, where Presidents Biden, Obama, and Clinton spoke inside in the largest single-night fundraiser in U.S. presidential campaign history. More than $25 million was raised.
Thank you. So, strategy. Listen to those people. Boy, when I hear them, end U.S. imperialism. Our taxes are paying for this. Our government is illegitimate. We need to build a new government for the people. Sounds awful much like the nationalist movement, doesn't it? What's the difference? The difference is one group does not believe in spiritual borders and the other one does. And every one of those people that we reach, because they really believe the same thing, we all believe the same thing. It's just how are we going to format this new America that's coming? Are we going to go socialist or are we going to go to spiritual borders? Do we want to have a new global governance, because that's who these folks are, or do we want to have self-governance? Because the ideas, the anti-imperialism, she even said we don't want to go back to the 1800s. We don't want to die in a nuclear war. We're watching a genocide in real time. I mean, these things are so close together. That's why the strategy, that's why the last podcast, I took apart the conservative movement, because the conservative movement looks at these people as, you know, the enemy. The conservative movement failed. That's why these folks popped up. If the conservative movement would have succeeded and conserved the idea of self-governance and not allowed the country to become corrupt, if there would have been sacred honor and borders, there'd be no need for this. But when you lose the sacred honor that this country was founded on, when you lose a connection to a creator that grants unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when we lose those ideas, when we allow progressive, another name for Marxists, to come in with an anti-Christian theology, which is called Marxism or secular humanism, and dominate our intellectual institutions and dominate all the foci of power in the society, media, Hollywood, corporations. When we allowed that as conservatives, we set up the conditions for this conflict, which of course, the people that are running the show love the conflict. Because as this thing continues to devolve and the rule of law breaks down, which we're going to end with next, the conservatives are going to scream for a police state. Rescue me. We're going to talk about that soon. But before we leave this segment on strategy, because what I'm saying in this segment is we have to take what the field gives us. These are allies of the nationalist movement. They're allies. I know it doesn't look that way, but they're actually saying the same things that the nationalist movement is saying. They're allies. They're not enemies. They're American citizens. Let us learn to talk. This is one of the things that I've been hearing over and over again. How do I talk to my friends and neighbors? Well, that's what we're going to be working on together as a community. How do we spread this message? How do we do it? Well, listen how this is going. Play number 4, please.
You can pay me to vote for a Democrat. Local, state, federal elections, I don't care what it is. You couldn't pay me to vote for one. You know why? Because they know that we, and I mean people whose skin color look like mine, they know that we vote party over interest. So after we vote, what do? They don't need us for anything. That's what they do. Year after year after year. I'm from Baltimore, and I go home at least twice a year to see family. Same abandoned homes, same crime rate. We haven't had a Republican mayor since the 60s. And look at our environment. The same can be said for Memphis. The same can be said for St. Louis. The same can be said for Detroit. The same can be said for a lot of these cities all over this country that have been led down the toilet by Democrats for decades. Stop voting party over interest and vote interest over party.
Okay. So you can see the narrative is breaking down. And what we have to do as a political action community is craft our strategy as if there is no strategy. We can't be thinking about I and them. There is no opponent. There's no opponents. We're all American citizens. And we have to be able to strike intellectually when the time is right, without thought, without predetermining our action. We have to have the spiritual borders that allow us to do the appropriate thing at the right time without thinking about it. As Bruce Lee said, the martial artist, the strategist, he's not thinking, but he's not dreaming. Present, ready to go. We never know when the opportunity will present ourselves to talk to that American citizen who's our friend, our neighbor, our parent, our child, our co-worker, and say that one sentence that comes through us that liberates them and sets them on the path of searching for truth. Now, we're going to end with a very serious subject. We have about 15 minutes left. We're going to move into something that's really potent. I mean, we're going to get down to where as they used to say at Firestone, where the rubber hits the road. And that's what's called the rule of law. We're going to listen to a relatively long piece. It's going to take up most of the rest of the podcast. And then I'm going to make some comments afterwards, and we're going to come back to this over and over again. Because what is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order? Well, it stands on the bedrock of Darwinism. There's no faith about it. It's a secular humanist movement. That is the abrogation of Christianity. That's number one. So its bedrock is anti-Christian. It's secular humanist. That's what it is. Its pillars that hold up the edifice of our culture are the coercion of the U.S. military and the coercion of U.S. economic power. The whole thing is illegitimate at the get-go. But it is deeply enmeshed in the institutions of our country that go back to 1776. And that's called the rule of law. The rule of law, or also known as the administrative state, also known as our law schools and our lawyers. Let's take a look at how they're talking about the events and how they see it through their eyes. We're going to be listening to a guy named John Michael Ludig. He's an American lawyer who served as a U.S. Circuit Judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit from 1991 to 2006. He's very respected, and he's thought of as a conservative, interestingly. But I know he's not a conservative because guess what he did when he retired? He became the general counsel of one of our biggest defense contractors, that'd be Boeing, a position he held from 2006 to 2019. So, this guy is a unipartyist to the maximum with a law degree. Dangerous. Let's take a listen.
Less than 2 weeks to go before he makes history by becoming the first ex-president of these United States to ever stand trial on criminal charges, Donald Trump is turning to a tactic straight out of a mobster's playbook. The ex-president going after the daughter of the New York judge, Judge Juan Merchan, who is overseeing the criminal hush money case. In typical Trumpian fashion, his attacks have been filled with foaming at the mouth, rage and bluster, and conspiracy theories with a dash of disinformation in there for good measure. The ex-president accusing the judge's daughter of sharing a photo of Donald Trump behind bars on social media. Court officials quickly knocked that down, but Trump hasn't stopped going after the judge's daughter. He has posted about her at least 4 times since Tuesday morning. Trump's attacks began one day after Judge Merchan imposed a gag order on Donald Trump, prohibiting him from lashing out against witnesses, jurors, court staff, and prosecutors, although Donald Trump can make comments about the judge and Alvin Bragg. Trump dancing around his gag order with an appalling attack on the judge's family is part of a pattern for Donald Trump. We who cover him are all too familiar with it by now. Trump attacks anyone and everyone who's part of any process that seeks to hold him accountable, especially when he gets nervous about it. And inevitably, threats, intimidation, and even violence ensue. The situation is so dire and so troubling, so unprecedented, and such a deep and obvious threat to the rule of law that a sitting judge is taking the extraordinary step of speaking out. That's federal judge Reggie Walton, a stalwart conservative appointed by President George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush to the bench, has faced threats because of his work in handling January 6 defendants in their cases. Here's what he had to say in those extraordinary public comments just last night.
It's very disconcerting to have someone making comments about a judge, and it's particularly problematic when those comments are in the form of a threat, especially if they're directed at one's family. I mean, we do these jobs because we're committed to the rule of law, and we believe in the rule of law, and the rule of law can only function effectively when we have judges who are prepared to carry out their duties without the threat of potential physical harm.
Now, without ever mentioning Donald Trump by name, Judge Walton pointed out that anyone with a platform, much less the kind of platform that comes with being an ex-president and the current presumptive Republican presidential nominee, has a responsibility to be careful with what they say.
I would think that any reasonable thinking person would appreciate that when they say things, it can sometimes resonate with others. And I think that's particularly true when you have somebody who has status in our society and they make certain statements. It can cause people to act on those statements, even if they don't necessarily intend for someone to do so. So I think it's very important that people in positions of authority be very circumspect in reference to the things that they say, so that they're not causing others to act on what they say and maybe cause injury or death to someone as a result of that.
Even more direct, Judge Walton's former colleague, friend of this show, Michael Ludig, who lamented that Judge Walton even had to do what he did there, go on television to defend the rule of law and the justice system from an ex-president. Ludig tweeting this, quote, "The nation is witnessing the determined delegitimization of both its federal and state judiciaries and the systematic dismantling of its system of justice and rule of law by a single man, the former president of the United States. Never in American history has any person, let alone a president of the United States, leveled such threatening attacks against the federal and state courts and federal and state judicial officers of the kind that the former president has leveled continually now for years. But suffice it to say, never in history has any person leveled such attacks and been met with such passivity, acquiescence, and submissiveness by the nation. The threat to the rule of law posed by an ex-president who does not hesitate to target judges and their children is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former federal judge Michael Ludig is here. Also with us, former assistant U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirshner's here, plus MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin joins us, and our friend MSNBC national affairs analyst John Heilman's here. So, you know, It's time to do something different. Like, we're not going to have this conversation again. I have come on the air with breaking news about requests for gag orders because of threats for judges and their kids more times than I could count today before I got ready. And Judge Ludig, I think it's time, I don't know who has to write the banners at the bottom of my show. I'm sorry in advance. But Donald Trump broke the rule of law. We should cover a broken judiciary in this country. Donald Trump managed to delay every federal criminal trial based on facts that he barely denies. Donald Trump managed to enlist the Supreme Court in a delay process, the highest court in the land. Donald Trump brazenly and repeatedly attacks not just judges, and I've had the privilege of sitting across not just from you, Judge Ludig, but from Judge Esther Salas, whose son was assassinated by a crazy person. Judges don't have Secret Service protecting them. They don't even always have, I mean, her child answered the door. What are we going to do different? Because Donald Trump sure as hell isn't changing.
Nicole, thank you for having me with you this afternoon. First, we all should congratulate and thank Judge Walton for his interview last night, coming forward with the perilous state of the federal judiciary. It took great courage for him to do that. He is one of the first, to my knowledge, sitting federal judges ever to appear on television to speak about a need of the federal court system. We all have to understand that from the first time that the former president began his attacks, vicious attacks on the federal courts and the state courts and their individual judges, his objective was to delegitimize those courts so that when and if they ruled against him in the various matters that he's been charged with, then at least his followers, if not a good part of the nation, would dismiss those rulings against him as having been politically inspired and motivated. In particular, in most of these instances, politically inspired by President Joe Biden and his administration and Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice. That led into what we have today, which is the fact that the former president is now actually campaigning for the presidency again on the delegitimization of America's institutions of democracy and law. Now, he's the only one at the moment who's claiming that those institutions are no longer legitimate. But many of his followers believe it today, and they will cast their votes in favor of Donald Trump in November on the basis that our institutions of law and democracy are no longer functioning. That's the tragedy. That's the tragedy that the nation faces right now. We've acquiesced in that to date. Acquiesce meaning no one, not one single person in a position of responsibility to address this issue has done so for want of courage and want of will. And until or unless we as a nation address this issue, then we're careening toward the effective end of the rule of law in America.
Well, I mean, Judge, let me press you on that. I mean, I think acquiescence and passivity are the words that captured my attention in your tweet. I mean, Trump has achieved the mission of delegitimizing our elections. Steve Kornacki's analysis of the exit polls from Super Tuesday suggests that anywhere from, I think, 58 to 65% of Republicans who participated on Super Tuesday think Donald Trump won in 2020. Donald Trump uses the criminal actions against him as a prod to raise money and to raise fervor. And he's already delegitimized the criminal prosecution and the criminal justice system, frankly, in a manner more successfully than any professional mobster. I mean, the reason that some of the safeguards exist in the criminal justice process is because even a hardened criminal is interested in serving less time. Trump isn't. He's interested in winning and then pardoning himself. So there are no levers inside American criminal or civil. I guess the money maybe is one of the levels, but in the criminal justice system, there are no more levers to press when it comes to Trump. How do we adjust and adapt?
Well, you're exactly right, Nicole. And as I've said over the past months, Donald Trump has largely succeeded in delegitimizing both America's democracy and elections, as well as its constitution and rule of law. Now, to your reference to a mobster, make no mistake, a mobster could never pose the threat that Donald Trump poses to American democracy and the rule of law. It's the fact that he was a president of the United States of America and is now attempting to delegitimize America's democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law. That's the existential threat that faces America today.
Hey, everyone.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. It's been a brisk hour and a half. Please go back and look at that again. There's some real high points in there to understand. First of all, they're making this about Donald Trump. And when I say they, I mean that's going to be their playbook from now until the election. And for me, it's not about Donald Trump. It's about the American people. This guy is allegedly a conservative. I'm going after the conservative movement. It failed. What did this guy do? He was a conservative jurist, which right off the bat, that's sketchy because he's graduated from a law school, which means he wasn't a Marxist. At least he's Marxist light. What did he do after being a judge? He went to work with one of our premier defense contractors as their top lawyer, which means what this man wants to defend is the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, which rests upon the rule of law. Donald Trump, in my opinion, this is my opinion, there's no effort that I can see to delegitimize the Constitution. In fact, I see this as a movement to re-energize our reliance on the Constitution. I don't see any effort to delegitimize the rule of law. What I see is a bedrock of Darwinism with two illegitimate pillars upon which our culture stands. How could one delegitimize what was legitimate? That'd be impossible. There must be something here to allow one human being to reveal contradictions in our culture. Now, I've said many times, I don't like Donald Trump's style. But when I see the style that he's opposing, where people are saying he's out to destroy the Constitution, he wants to be a totalitarian, that he wants to undermine the rule of law, I don't see any of that, which just goes to show me it depends upon which street corner you're standing. If you're standing on the payroll of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order and you're one of their priests, like this guy is, a priest, and you see the nationalist movement coming that's saying, hey, the entire system has become corrupt because it's an empire based on materialism, and he's going, whoa, that's going to cut off my cash. I'm going to label this guy an insurrectionist, a racist, a fascist, and any other thing they can put on him, and then all of his followers are maggots. What we've done is we've polarized the country, and you heard what he said. If Donald Trump gets elected, it's the end of rule of law. Now, justice is critical. What is it based on? What is it? It's based on truth. You cannot have justice without truth. That's why we are truth-seeking media. If you look on CBS and you don't see anything about this rapidly escalating set of conflicts in the world, somebody is keeping the truth away from you. What are they doing? Aren't those the same people? Like Boeing? Aren't those the same people that are saying that the nationalist movement is going to end the rule of law? No, what the nationalist movement is going to do is strengthen the spiritual borders of individual citizens and dial back the empire. And boy, that scares them. That terrifies them because that is their religion. So what we have, in my opinion, and I always like to say in my opinion, is the classic through line of all conflict. Do you believe in God? And if you believe in God, what God do you believe in? And what these people believe in is the God of science and the God of Darwinism and the God that holds one race superior and another inferior. In this case, if you have a PhD or a law degree, you know the truth. And the other group is seeking to restore spiritual borders in humility and to treat their fellow American citizens as they themselves would like to be treated. Now, the elected leader of this movement is a lightning rod for conflict. I'm going to say again for the 5th time this week, he's not my cup of tea. I wouldn't do it that way. But what he's revealing is the contradictions in our relationship with China, in our relationships with the world generally, and with our relationships inside the country. And it seems like things are coming apart at the seams because of Donald Trump. But what Donald Trump has done is he's shown the American citizens the problems that have developed since 1946 that has led to a very unwell culture. And I'm not saying he's the solution to this unwellness. But before you fix something, you got to understand it. And one of the things that's come up with Trump is, I understand that every nationalist is a reformed conservative. And on that note, I want to wish you a very well weekend. Try to come up with some good stuff for next week. I'm looking forward to your comments. I appreciate the feedback. As you know, sometimes I take that feedback and put it right into the podcast. We're a community. Let's go change the world together. Thank you very much.